Some of the most damaging relationships are the hardest ones to explain, and they don't have to look extreme in order to be deeply harmful. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast, where we make sense of what never quite made sense. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more, it's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin moving forward. You need a coach. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. If you've ever gone from fighting for your voice to barely recognizing yourself, this episode is going to explain exactly how that happened. Because covert narcissistic abuse doesn't just hurt you, it rewires you. And why it happened was never your fault. You've probably heard of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, the fight or flight response. Most people have. But what often gets left out is that these 4 trauma responses are not random. They aren't personality quirks or character flaws. They are actually a hierarchy of self-advocacy. And where you land on that hierarchy depends entirely on how much self-advocacy you feel like you have, how much you believe your voice matters, that your needs are worth defending, that you have the right to take up space. Today, we're going to walk through all 4 responses. We're going to see exactly how covert narcissistic abuse moves you down this hierarchy and explore why the fawn response becomes the default for so many survivors of narcissistic abuse. When your sense of self-advocacy is at its highest, you fight. You believe that you are worth defending, and so you do. When it drops a little, you flee. You're still protecting yourself, just not in the same way. You're now doing it by getting out rather than standing your ground. When your self-advocacy drops a little further, that's when you start to freeze. Your system becomes so overwhelmed that it simply shuts down. You go numb. You can't move forward or backward. And when your sense of self-advocacy is at its lowest, when some part of you has learned that your needs don't matter, that your voice will not be heard, that the safest thing you can do is make yourself useful to the person that has power over you, that is when you fawn. You survive by erasing yourself, by becoming what they need you to be, with the hope that they will keep you safe. Your self-advocacy is gone. Now, here is where this really gets important for those of us who have been in covert narcissistic relationships. Most people don't start at the fawning response. They get moved there. That move happens so gradually, so quietly, that most people don't even realize it's happening until they're already there. Think about what a covert narcissistic relationship does over time. When you fight, and I'm not talking here about yelling or throwing things, I'm just talking about the quiet, persistent effort to be heard, to have your voice matter, to have your feelings be listened to and seen, to have your perspective count for something in your own relationship. It starts with small things. Maybe you share an opinion and they dismiss it so casually that you wonder why you said anything at all, but you try again. You back it up. You make your case, and somehow by the end of the conversation, you now are still have been talked out of your own perspective. But the next time you come in more prepared. You think it through beforehand. You choose your words more carefully. You stay calm. You tell them something hurt you, and when they explain why it shouldn't have, you hold your ground. This is fighting for yourself. You explain why it hurt your feelings. But what happens? The conversation still goes in circles, and it goes in circles until you're so exhausted that you just let it go. But maybe still you don't give up. You read about communication, you try new approaches, you bring things up at better times or different times in different ways. You ask for conversations when you're both calm. You use the I feel statements. You try everything you can think of just to be heard, just to matter, to have your experience acknowledged by the person you love. But nothing works. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because the goal was never mutual understanding, from your partner. The goal was never for you to be heard, and your nervous system eventually gets that message, even if your heart takes much longer to accept it. But before you fully give up, something else happens. The frustration builds. You have been the calm one. You have been trying to stay so reasonable. You've tried every approach you can think of, and the wall just keeps standing there. So one day, maybe the frustration spills over. Maybe you do raise your voice. Maybe you snap. Maybe you say something sharper than you intended. It doesn't have to be dramatic, it just has to be a crack in your composure. But the covert narcissist notices here, and suddenly this becomes the story. Not the months of you being dismissed, not all of your attempts of standing up for yourself, all the fight that was not this outward explosive fight, but still fighting to be heard, not the circular conversations, not the years of you being erased. This moment, this one crack in your composure, becomes the defining narrative. You were the one who yelled. You were the one who was aggressive. You were the one who is now difficult to deal with. They will reference this moment for months, maybe years. And somewhere deep down, you might even start to wonder if they're right. Maybe you are the problem and you are too much. That moment of frustration, which, by the way, was completely human and completely understandable, becomes one more reason to stop fighting altogether. Your nervous system gets the message loud and clear. Fighting doesn't work. Fighting is dangerous. So you stop doing it. Now let's talk about flight. Flight in a covert narcissistic relationship rarely looks like packing a bag. It looks like trying to take a breath in the middle of a storm. You're in the middle of a difficult conversation and you can feel yourself getting overwhelmed. Your heart is racing, your thoughts are scattered, you can't think straight anymore. And so you do exactly what every healthy communication guide tells you to do. You say, "Hey, I need a few minutes. I need to calm myself down so that we can talk about this properly." And maybe you go to another room, or maybe you step outside, or maybe you just sit in your car in the driveway and try to remember how to breathe. This is not running away. This is not abandonment. In fact, this is one of the healthiest things you can do in a conflict. But the covert narcissist turns it into a weapon. When you come back, the original conversation is gone. What's there instead is a new one, and you're the villain in it. You always walk away when things get hard. You never want to resolve anything. I'm always the one trying to fix this, and you just leave. The person who stepped away to regulate themselves is now the one who clearly doesn't care about the relationship. And the projection during this time, that is particularly disorienting. They accuse you of the very things they are doing. They say that you refuse to communicate, while they are the ones who've been using circular conversations and blame shifting to avoid any real resolution. They say you're being difficult, while they follow you from room to room, not allowing you the space you just asked for. They say you're the one destroying the relationship, while they blow up your phone, alternating between angry messages and sweet ones until you come back just to make it stop. Your nervous system gets the message loud and clear. Taking space for yourself is not safe. It comes at a very high cost. So slowly, you stop trying this approach. Now let's look at freeze. By the time you reach freeze, you are not making a choice. Your nervous system has made it for you. You are still there. You are still showing up. That looks like making dinner, going to work, sitting across from them at the table. But something inside has gone profoundly quiet. You've stopped bringing things up because you already know how it's going to go. You've stopped reacting to things that used to provoke a response. You've stopped sharing the small things about your day, your thoughts, your feelings, because sharing has never really been safe, and somewhere along the way, you stopped pretending that it was. You sit across from them at dinner, and you realize you have nothing to say anymore. Not because you don't have thoughts, but because expressing them has never led to anywhere good. So you go through the motions, you perform the relationship, but you're not really there anymore. You've stopped even crying during arguments, maybe because your tears got mocked, maybe because they somehow always became about the covert narcissist. Your tears turned into evidence of what you were putting them through. So you learned to shut that down too. You got very good at going blank, at feeling nothing, or at least looking like you feel nothing. And the covert narcissist, they use all of this against you. The silence that your exhausted nervous system desperately needs becomes an invitation for them to unload everything that they've been cataloging about you. And make no mistake, they have been keeping score. Things that you said months ago, situations that you thought were long resolved, moments where you weren't perfect, where you fell short of their bar, where you made a mistake. It all comes out now in one overwhelming wave while you are least equipped to defend yourself. You're already shut down. You're already depleted. And now you're supposed to respond to a laundry list of failures. You can barely string a sentence together. And if you can't respond, if you stay quiet because you have nothing left, that silence gets added to the list too. You're now accused of being indifferent, of not caring, of being emotionally unavailable. Boy, that's a funny one. After all the years of them being emotionally unavailable. The person who has been fighting and fleeing and finally now has shut down from sheer exhaustion is being told that they never cared at all. Your inability to engage at this point becomes more evidence of who you are, more proof that you are the problem. You're told now that you never cared at all, when in reality you cared so deeply that it has broken you. The freeze that was supposed to protect you has become now yet another thing to be used against you. And then we come to fawn. And this is where the sacrificing of self becomes complete. By the time someone reaches fawn, self-sacrifice isn't something they do occasionally. It has become their entire operating system inside the relationship. Every thought, every action, every response is filtered through one question. How is this going to affect them? Not what do I need? Not what do I think? Not what do I want? Those questions have become quietly retired because somewhere along the way, you learned that your needs create problems. Your opinions start arguments. Your wants are inconvenient at best and punishable at worst. So you adapt. You apologize before you even know what you did wrong, just to stop the tension before it starts. You monitor your partner's mood the moment they walk in the door. Before a word is spoken, you are already reading the room. The expression on their face, the way they set down their keys, the energy they bring in with them, and you are adjusting yourself accordingly. You preemptively cancel plans, change your schedule, and rearrange your own preferences, not because you were asked to. We don't even have that happening anymore. Just because you've learned that getting ahead of the problem is safer than dealing with the fallout. You laugh at things that aren't funny. You agree with opinions you don't hold. You pretend to enjoy things you don't enjoy. You hide your own achievements or good news because somewhere along the way you learned that your wins make things harder, not better. You find yourself now defending the covert narcissist to friends and family who are worried about you, protecting the very person who is dismantling you. You hear yourself saying, I'm fine, and it's not that big of a deal. You hear it so often that you start to believe it yourself. You rehearse conversations before you have them, carefully choosing your words, anticipating reactions, trying to manage the response before it even happens. And in this whole process, you lose track of who you actually are. What do you like? What do you think? What do you want? You genuinely don't know anymore because the self that had those things has been slowly, quietly sacrificed. Not all at once, not in one dramatic moment, but piece by piece, in 1,000 small moments of choosing to make yourself smaller so that someone else could feel bigger. And the cruelest part in all of this, the covert narcissist rewards this fawning behavior. When you fawn, the tension breaks. Peace returns. Your nervous system learns, hey, this works. That reward gets reinforced over and over until fawning is not a choice anymore. It's just who you've become. Dismantling your sense of self-advocacy through gaslighting, criticism, making you question your own perception of reality, blame shifting. If you can't trust your own judgment, how can you possibly believe that you are worth defending? That belief that you matter enough to fight for yourself is the very foundation of self advocacy. It is also the very thing that they attack the most. So here's a quick summary of these 4 responses. When you fight, which remember has the most self advocacy, they accuse you of being rebellious and difficult. When you flee, they accuse you of abandoning them and the relationship. When you freeze, they accuse you of being indifferent and not caring. But when you fawn, they reward you. And it is in this fawning that your self advocacy is now completely gone. But here's something that I want you to hear. For many survivors, this erosion did not begin with a narcissistic relationship. It began much earlier. If you grew up in a home where standing up for yourself was punished, where expressing your needs was met with anger, withdrawal, or shame, your nervous system learned those lessons long before you ever met your significant other. You may have already been partway down this hierarchy before the relationship even began. For those who grew up under a controlling or narcissistic parent, this is especially significant because what you experienced wasn't just occasional difficult moments, it was a consistent, ongoing environment where the rules were clear, even if they were never spoken out loud. You learned early that the parents' emotions were the only emotions that mattered in the room. Their mood set the tone for everyone else. You learned to read them, really read them, before you ever said a word, before you walked through the door after school, before you asked for anything. You scanned the environment first because you had to, because getting it wrong had consequences. So you learned that your needs were an inconvenience at best, that asking for too much created tension, that having an opinion that differed from theirs was dangerous territory, that the path of least resistance, the path that kept everyone safe, was to shrink yourself, to agree, to make yourself as easy and as useful and as undemanding as possible. This is where you learn to fawn. Sound familiar? You were practicing fawning long before you even had a word for it. It wasn't a weakness. It was a skill that you developed to survive in an environment that didn't make room for your full self. So then you grew up. You went looking for love. And what felt like love, what felt like chemistry, like connection, like finally being seen, was actually familiarity. The dynamic felt readable because you had been living it your whole life. The push and pull, the walking on eggshells, the working hard to earn someone's approval, none of that felt like a red flag. It felt like home. This is also a reason why so many people find themselves in covert narcissistic relationships not once, but repeatedly. And if that is you, I want to be very clear here. This is not a character flaw. It is not bad luck. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Fawning has become your default, which can easily attract narcissistic people who need that type of self-sacrifice. When fawning is what kept you safe as a child, your system learns to find it familiar. And familiar feels like home, even when home was never safe. The covert narcissistic dynamic doesn't feel alarming to a nervous system that grew up in that environment. It feels recognizable. Familiarity feels like chemistry, and it blocks our vision of reality. This is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign of just how deeply this was wired into you. So wherever you are right now in this hierarchy, whether you're deep in fawning, whether you're frozen, whether you're just starting to realize what's been happening and you're still fighting for yourself, I want you to hear this. You didn't get here randomly. You didn't get here because you are weak or foolish or broken. You got here because some part of you was trying to survive, and that part of you did its job. It got you through. Survival was never meant to be the destination, but it was the right response for where you were. And just understanding this, just being able to look at your responses and see them for what they actually are, that is already a huge step, a very real one. In an upcoming episode, I am going to take a deep look into how a highly religious upbringing can also move you down this hierarchy before you ever enter a romantic relationship. Because when every response except fawning has a spiritual consequence attached to it, fighting is rebellious, fleeing is backsliding, freezing is lukewarm, fawning doesn't just feel safe, it feels holy. It feels like who God made you to be. That conversation is coming, and I think it's going to hit close to home for a lot of you. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss these future episodes. Until next time, I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more. It's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin to move forward. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. Your story matters, and you deserve to be heard without judgment. Check out my coaching services at my website, again, covertnarcissism.com. And don't forget to subscribe, to thumbs up, to follow, to like this podcast so that you can get more empowering episodes like this one and to help us continue spreading the word so that our community can continue to grow. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those she has talked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support any allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of this material and information provided.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.